Discovery in the woods. On February 15, 1975, 3 teenage boys wandered through the wooded trails of the Rocky River area in Millstream Run Reservation, just south of Cleveland, Ohio. What began as a casual afternoon exploration quickly turned grim when they stumbled upon partial human remains. Scattered across the underbrush were bones weathered, brittle, and clearly disturbed by wildlife. Missing key skeletal elements, including the jawbone and several facial bones, the remains were difficult to analyze. However, what investigators could determine was chilling. The remains belonged to a young white woman who had been shot in the head with a .24 caliber bullet. Local law enforcement cordoned off the area, combing through brush and soil for any evidence, but the harsh winter and time had stripped the site of forensic clues. No clothing, personal items, or clear indicators of identity were recovered. The skeleton was too damaged for standard facial reconstruction, and dental records were incomplete due to the absence of a full dental structure. In the months that followed, detectives attempted to identify the victim using available 1970s resources. They compared the skull to photographs of high-profile missing women, including Patty Hearst, and canvassed missing persons reports throughout Ohio and surrounding states. Nothing matched. Without a name, a suspect, or a lead, the investigation quickly stalled. The case grew cold. With no next of kin to claim her, and no identity to trace, the unidentified woman was buried in Potter's Fielder section of Memorial Garden, cemeteries reserved for unclaimed or unknown individuals. Her grave was marked by nothing more than a line in a cemetery ledger: unknown white female bones. For decades, Christina Skates. The obsession begins in 2014. Christina Skates was a 23-year-old biology student with a growing interest in genealogy. While conducting research for a class project, she came across an entry in a cemetery ledger that stopped her cold. Unknown white female bones. The words felt hauntingly impersonal. What struck her most was the location: Memorial Garden Cemetery in Cuyahoga County. Just a short drive from where she had grown up. The proximity made it feel personal, as if the forgotten woman could have been someone she passed on the street. Already skilled in genetic research, Christina began digging. She contacted local police departments, coroners' offices, and state agencies across Ohio, seeking any information tied to the unidentified woman buried under that anonymous label. But each call ran into the same obstacle: bureaucracy. Records were missing, lost, or simply never entered into digital systems. Christina's persistence, however, caught the attention of Lieutenant Don Silvis, a veteran officer who still remembered the decades-old discovery. Silvis mailed Christina copies of long-forgotten case files, faded crime scene photographs, coroner's notes, autopsy summaries, and diagrams of the skeletal remains. Holding these materials in her hands transformed the case from an abstract mystery into something heartbreakingly real. This wasn't just a set of bones, this was someone's daughter, someone's sister, someone with a story that had vanished with time. Christina resolved that she wouldn't let this woman stay buried in silence. The more she learned, the more committed she became. The file was now hers to solve, not out of academic curiosity, but out of moral obligation. She wasn't a cop, a coroner, or a prosecutor, but she believed she could be something just as powerful. The internet steps in. Reddit and Websleuths unite after exhausting traditional channels and running into repeated dead ends. Christina Skates realized she couldn't solve the mystery alone. In 2015, she turned to the internet, posting on Reddit's unsolved under the username Call Me. There, she laid out the case in detail: the discovery of the bones, the forensic evidence, the lack of official records, and the images from the 1970s crime scene. The post didn't just attract casual readers, it galvanized a passionate community. Among the responders were amateur sleuths, ex-law enforcement, genealogists, and cold case enthusiasts. Many were shocked that such a case had never been identified, let alone forgotten. The collective sense of injustice drove them to action. Redditors began organizing search parties not in person, but online. They split responsibilities, assigned leads, and combed through national databases, public records, newspaper archives, and genealogy sites for any possible connection. Soon, the effort expanded beyond Reddit to Websleuths, a well-known online crime-solving forum. Threads dedicated solely to the Strongsville Jane Doe began filling with updates, theories, and comparisons. Some users tracked down old missing persons cases from the 1970s. Others used advanced ancestry tools and military records to cross-reference timelines. Every clue was scrutinized. The digital movement proved what few had considered before. A decentralized network of citizens could rival, and sometimes surpass, traditional investigative methods. Christina's transparency and meticulous record-keeping gave the online community direction. What was once a forgotten Jane Doe now had an entire crowd of digital detectives working toward her identification. What made this different was not just the technology, it was the artist who gave her a face. Carl Koppelman wasn't a detective, but his work had already solved multiple cold cases. A retired certified public accountant turned forensic artist, Koppelman had gained national attention for his facial reconstructions of unidentified victims, most notably Tammy Jo Alexander. When Christina Skates and the Websleuths community brought the Strongsville Jane Doe to his attention, he was intrigued but unsure. The skull was in poor condition, with significant degradation, missing the jaw and many teeth, key elements for a facial approximation. Despite the challenge, Koppelman agreed to try. He used a digital modeling program, along with FBI tissue depth markers, to estimate facial features. For areas where the bone structure was missing, he applied forensic standards and artistic intuition, creating educated projections based on age, sex, and ancestry. After hours of careful reconstruction, the final image emerged. A young woman with kind eyes, soft facial contours, and a calm, haunting expression. This wasn't just an illustration, it was a resurrection. The image humanized the forgotten skeleton. Koppelman's rendering was shared across Reddit, Websleuths, and genealogy forums. It gave the Strongsville Jane Doe something she hadn't had in decades. A present. For the first time, viewers could look into her eyes and imagine who she might have been. The digital face prompted a surge of interest. New users joined the online forums. Freshly, a forgotten case that was never filed in 2016. While speaking with the Cuyahoga County Medical Examiner's Office about the Strongsville Jane Doe, Carl Koppelman made a passing reference to the case. What he received in response stunned him. The office had no record of any such unidentified woman. After a deeper check, the truth emerged. The case had never been entered into the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System. This revelation pointed to a major administrative oversight. In the 1970s, digital systems didn't exist. Records were handwritten, stored in file cabinets, and often incomplete. Somewhere between the discovery of the remains and the transfer of jurisdiction, the case slipped through the cracks. Without official listing in any national registry, the Strongsville Jane Doe was functionally invisible to the modern systems designed to solve cold cases. With the help of local officials and Christina Skates, the case was formally entered into nameless now, complete with Koppelman's facial reconstruction, forensic details, and historical documentation. This critical step opened the door to national exposure and data matching capabilities. It didn't take long for things to change. Within months of entering the case into nameless, Sergeant Jeff Smith of the Akron Police Department noticed something. A missing persons report from 1974, filed in his own jurisdiction, bore a striking resemblance to the case. The timeline, age, and location were all too close to ignore. A decades-old mystery had finally intersected with a long-lost name, thanks to a digital correction of an analog error. Linda Marie Pagano, name restored after the Strongsville Jane Doe case, was added to Sergeant Jeff Smith of the Akron Police Department came across a familiar entry, 1974 missing persons report for a 17-year-old girl named Linda Marie Pagano. She had disappeared after a fight with her stepfather. The year, the age, and the general location all aligned. Smith alerted the team, and Carl Koppelman reviewed the file. When he saw Linda's photograph, he knew instantly it was her. The face he had painstakingly reconstructed was nearly identical to the real one. Linda's case had gone cold quickly in 1974, and her records, like many others, hadn't been integrated into national data. Her disappearance had been largely forgotten by the public. Though her dental records were partial and not a definitive match, they did bear striking similarities to those of the unidentified remains. With growing confidence in the identification, authorities took the next step. In 2017, the Strongsville Jane Doe was exhumed from her grave in Pottersfield. Ground-penetrating radar was used to locate her burial site, and the remains were carefully recovered for further analysis. DNA samples were extracted and compared to those of Linda's surviving siblings. On June 29, 2018, the results confirmed what many had already come to believe. The unknown white female, found in 1975, was Linda Marie Pagano. After more than 4 decades, the girl who had vanished into silence finally had her identity restored. Her case, once lost in bureaucratic shadows, was now a story of rediscovery, driven by pursuit. The final night. Linda's story. Linda Marie Pagano was a quiet, independent teenager navigating the turbulence of adolescence in 1970s Akron, Ohio. On the night of August 31, 1974, she attended a concert by Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young in Cleveland with friends. The music, the energy, and the escape were all typical for a girl her age. After the show, she dropped off her friends and returned home around 4 a.m. Waiting at the house was her stepfather, Byron Claflin. He had been drinking heavily and was reportedly angry. An argument erupted. According to his later statements, he threw Linda out of the house in a drunken rage. She was left outside with no car, no phone, and nowhere safe to go. That was the last confirmed time anyone ever saw Linda alive. No one reported her missing immediately. Her stepfather claimed she had run away. With little concern from law enforcement and no urgent search effort, Linda effectively vanished overnight. As days turned to weeks, and then years, the trail grew cold. Her friends lost contact. Her boyfriend at the time, Steve Wilson, disappeared from public records. No further details emerged to fill the gaps of Linda's final hours. Her stepfather, Byron Claflin, remained a person of interest for years, but was never charged. He died in 1990, taking with him any answers he may have held. Decades later, Linda's story remains incomplete, missing its final pages. But the known facts, long buried, had finally surfaced. Her name was no longer lost. Institutional failures and systemic errors. Linda Pagano case underscores a deep and troubling pattern. Systemic failure at nearly every level. From the moment her stepfather dismissed her disappearance as a runaway case, law enforcement failed to investigate thoroughly. Her missing persons report, though filed, never made it into national systems like nameless or the FBI's. At the same time, the unidentified skeletal remains discovered just 20 miles away in Strongsville remained sitting outside the reach of any searchable registry. Clerical errors, fragmented communication between jurisdictions, and outdated technology meant to related cases existed in complete isolation for over 40 years. Even though Linda's physical description, age, and disappearance date aligned with the discovery timeline of the remains, no one connected the two. No alerts were issued. No follow-ups bridged the gap between Akron and Cuyahoga County. Without digital integration or centralized oversight, the system lost her twice: first, when she vanished, and again when she was found, but left unnamed. It took a curious student and an online community to succeed where decades of official channels had failed. Their persistence sparked a wave of audits across Ohio, exposing similar cases where unidentified remains had been left outside of modern tracking systems. The revelation prompted local and state agencies to reevaluate cold case protocols and invest in better, cross-referencing technology. Linda Pagano's story became a rallying point not just for justice, but for reform. She revealed how easily someone could be erased not by malice, but by neglect, oversight, and bureaucratic blind spots. A new era of amateur justice. Christina Skates never set out to be a She didn't have a badge or formal training, just curiosity, persistence, and empathy. What began as a single line in a cemetery ledger evolved into one of the most significant amateur-led cold case identifications in recent memory. Her work, paired with Carl Koppelman's artistry and the dedication of online communities, redefined the boundaries between professional investigation and public collaboration. Law enforcement, once skeptical of online sleuths, began to take notice. Redditors and Websleuths weren't just posting theories, they were organizing, analyzing, and often uncovering leads that had been missed or abandoned. Christina's case demonstrated that with proper documentation, respect for process, and cooperation, amateurs could play a vital role in solving cold cases. Linda Pagano's identification became a case study for missing persons, researchers, and digital forensics educators. Universities and law enforcement conferences cited the case as a breakthrough in how decentralized intelligence could work in tandem with official investigations. For Christina, the journey came full circle when she met Michael Pagano, Linda's surviving brother. In that moment, the digital work became deeply personal. It was no longer just about the data, the bones, or the systemite. It was about bringing a sister home. Linda's case became more than a solved mystery. It became a movement, one that empowered others to question, to research, and to care. In a world overwhelmed by forgotten cases, Christina proved that one person, armed with compassion and determination, could still make history. Final rest and enduring legacy. In January 2019, Linda Marie Pagano was finally laid to rest with dignity. Her cremated remains were buried beside her mother, bringing closure to a family that had waited nearly 45 years for answers. What had once been an anonymous grave in Potter's Field was now a marked resting place, proof that forgotten victims could still find their way home. But Linda's story did more than resolve a decades-old mystery. It ignited a national conversation about the cracks in missing persons investigations. Her case became a symbol for reform, prompting audits of outdated databases and renewed scrutiny of cold case protocols across the country. In Ohio alone, dozens of unidentified remains were re-examined as a direct result of Linda's identification. The grassroots effort that solved her case also reshaped how justice is pursued in the digital age. Genealogy enthusiasts, forensic artists, online forums, and determined individuals now have a seat at the investigative table. Christina Skates didn't just help identify a body, she helped change a system. Linda's legacy is not just in the justice she received, but in the awareness she raised. For every Jane or John Doe still buried under years of dust and neglect, her story is a reminder that resolution is possible. Persistence, technology, and empathy can rewrite even the most forgotten cases. The Strongsville Jane Doe is gone, but Linda Marie Pagano remains no longer a mystery, no longer alone. Her voice, silenced in 1974, now echoes as a call for change and remembrance.